So if you were wandering around the streets in the red light district, did some people think you were offering services?
Well,
you were never scared or worried about the cartels?
No.
Blind ignorance? Blind faith?
I think naivety.
How did you get involved in a voodoo session?
Just, you hear these things that are happening.
And you thought, I'm going to that.
Yeah.
Your marriage was the result of a hangover, in a way.
No.
Or backgammon.
Or backgammon, more likely.
Backgammon.
Yeah.
We'll stick with backgammon.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
What are they? Let us into that little world.
Not now.
Early on, you mentioned that you went from California down to Mexico, and then you went back and you traveled to other destinations, but you're not mentioning the trip to South America on a cargo ship.
That's right. Having gone back to England to have a bath and wash my clothes.
I like the way you mentioned going back to England to have a bath, because this really implies that when you're traveling, you do little washing.
Very little washing. Very little washing. And you wash in the rivers or the sea, and you just get on with it. What little water you come across, you use for washing.
The other thing is you do get used to your own smell and everybody else's smell.
Absolutely.
I discovered this during an extreme marathon that you and I have both done for 7 days. Basically, there is no ways to wash yourself.
Yes.
And everybody was going, oh, the stench. And I have to be honest, after day one, I smelt nobody at all.
It didn't matter. But to go back to Ochrabis and to your, not a fetish, but your concern about facilities, how did you deal with no facilities, toilet facilities, for example, at Ochrabis?
You approach it with the mindset, this is an experience. And if I have all of the amenities that I'm used to, it is not an experience.
Right.
I need to be faced with challenges, and I need to go without in order to go home and think to myself, I've experienced something which has intrinsic value in the rest of my life now.
Did you feel that? Did you really feel it made a contribution to how you spent your life thereafter?
I would tell anybody, you have to do something like that or something similar.
Yes.
But we'll go into the details of Kalahari in a little while.
Yes.
Many years ago, my family and I were in Durban, and we were in the docks, and there was a ship that had docked, and I looked at it, and my wife and I were saying, oh, wouldn't it be amazing just to be on the ship and travel? And this wasn't a cruise liner.
No.
This was a cargo ship.
Yeah.
It's a rough and ready ship.
Yes.
But in retrospect, I don't know if I would. Is that the kind of ship that you were on?
Yes, it was. It was. I mean, there was just one cabin, and there were obviously no facilities, no deck quoits or bingo or anything like that. It was a working ship. Mm. It was a very, very rough crossing. I think even the crew were seasick. It was so rough.
Did you get your sea legs?
Only when I got onto land again. Have you ever experienced sea legs on land?
Do you feel that the land is, because it's stationary, it actually feels like the land is moving?
Yes, yeah. But it was good. It was about a 5-day.
From where to where?
No, that was the South American one. Yes, okay. So that was a bit longer. The other one we did was a short one.
So you docked in Argentina?
Yes.
And then from there?
There we stayed. We found ourselves a flat in what we didn't know then was the red light district. But when you're new to a place, you're not influenced by anything.
So if you were wandering around the streets in the red light district, did some people think you were offering services?
Well, we would speak English, so I think that was a deterrent anyway, and not Spanish. We all got jobs in schools teaching English. I was at a school that whose students had been expelled from most other schools. So
they were the naughty ones.
They were the naughty ones. But in the end, it was on Teachers' Day, when obviously the students give presents to the teacher. I got 16 pairs of shoes because I had gone to the class every single day with the one pair of shoes I was traveling with. So all these kids gave me, or their parents gave me, a pair of shoes. So lovely leather shoes.
Those children must have gone home and said, Mommy, the teacher has one pair of shoes. Broken, holy, worn pair of shoes. Absolutely. She must be very poor.
Yeah, that's right. I did actually manage to sell the shoes, which helped, of course, to go on to our travels from Buenos Aires. So we were there for about a year. We continued into Uruguay and Paraguay and up to Manaus, to Belém.
So you went from a Spanish territory into a Portuguese territory.
Yeah.
You could communicate in Spanish, but if you have a look at Spanish and Portuguese, both come from Latin. So could you communicate in Portuguese?
Well, every now and then I actually lapsed into Latin, which helped me tremendously. It was more difficult in Brazil, obviously, because in Buenos Aires anyway, the people there, especially the students, want to practice their English. And one thing we did, or I had this thing about graveyards. I think graveyards tell you a hell of a lot about a country or a city, wherever you are. And Buenos Aires had the most wonderful graveyard. And you can, as I say, learn a lot about it. And it's just such a peaceful place to be. So I was there once and I didn't realize the time. And I found that I was locked into the graveyard, which was quite disturbing. Fortunately, there was this lovely old lady who had been to visit her husband's grave, and she had also been locked in. But she knew, it obviously happened to her before, she knew how to get out. And ever since then, she sort of befriended me, and I used to go and talk to her about her husband who was in politics and why he was in the graveyard. So it's those sort of incidences that are just wonderful to add to your travels.
You could never experience that in everyday life.
No.
Getting up, going to the mall, doing our everyday things.
Absolutely.
There are just not those opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you still carry on this tradition of going to graveyards in different countries?
And in this country too, I do. You know, if you look at these graveyards, they can tell you a lot. I mean, whether there was some sort of plague or a disease amongst the kids. There were a lot of kids' graves there.
If you have a look at drug proliferation from the Americas, really started in the 1960s and became very prevalent and a big problem from 1970s onwards.
Yes.
And that's when you were there.
Yes.
You were never scared or worried about the cartels?
No.
Blind ignorance? Blind faith?
I think naivety. Yes, total naivety. One of the things I went to was a voodoo session. And it was quite incredible how this one child became a dog, and he began to whine and bark, and he was obviously really possessed by a dog, and he was so far gone that it took him a long while to come round to being a young boy again.
How did you get involved in a voodoo session?
Just, you hear these things that are happening.
And you thought, I'm going to that.
Yeah, yes, that sounds interesting. Let me go to that.
You weren't concerned that perhaps you would become part of that voodoo ceremony?
What I did fear, if you can call it fear, or I was apprehensive about, is that I would become, as you say, part of it. Maybe I would be possessed. Well, maybe that's why I'm called the White Witch now.
Who calls you the White Witch?
My family do.
Don't you love family? But they must say it in the most loving sense.
Oh, they do, yes. And in fact, they want to use my powers in a positive way so that they pass exams and they, win a match. That's when the White Witch comes in. Whilst we were in Belém, we took a trip up the Amazon to Manaus, where we wanted to see the big opera house that was obviously built during the rubber boom. Unfortunately, it was closed, but we had also heard there was a boat that was running up one of the tributaries to a place called Portobello, and they used to run a train from Portobello to get the rubber out into Bolivia. So we thought that sounds a good trip to make. So we found an old fishing boat that was going up, and they took the three of us. We obviously just slept in hammocks on the deck, and they were delivering one sheep to a tiny little community down this tributary, which we did. And then it went to Portobello, to collect somebody who wanted to come back to Manaus. And that took about 10 days. One was so close to the jungle. It was amazing. Funnily enough, the actual captain was a law student. So, this was his family business, so he hadn't pursued law. He'd just continued with his family business of chugging up and down this tributary. And when we got to Portobello and the boat had left, we learnt that the train ran twice a year and it had just left. So the idea was that we were going to be there for at least 6 months in the middle of the jungle. There was a missionary there that took us in, but they were a bit concerned for us rather than us being concerned for ourselves. So we stayed with them for a little while, and then we met an eccentric butterfly entomologist with his big net running through the jungle trying to catch these rare birds. So he was an entertainment for us too. They then did put the train on for us. Well, not for us, but they realized they had enough wares that they wanted to sell in Bolivia. The train was called originally the Devil's Train because in the construction of the railroad, a lot of people lost their lives. So we got on it. It was no windows, and every so often we got out and we chopped wood to feed the train to go further on. So we were part of the moving system, as it were.
When you realized initially that, we're going to be here for 6 months, you were fine with that?
Yes. What can you do in the jungle? Let's see what we can do. Maybe we can learn about the plants. We can see how they live, how they eat.
Nowadays, before we go on any trip, we have a look at how much money have I got?
Yes,
how long can we stay? When is my money going to run out? To the extreme where when you apply for a visa, you have to prove that you have enough money to last you more than the period that you're going to be in that country.
Yeah, I think that is the privilege of traveling when I did. Visas, you went across borders without visas. It didn't occur. You didn't have to account, as you say, to be able to support yourself. And there were always ways of supporting yourself and getting money. One way was we gave blood for money. That was in India. We gave blood.
And was there also a restriction on the amount of times that you can give blood in a certain period? Because I know in a number of countries where they have an issue where people are homeless and they don't have money, they sneak in and donate blood more than what they should, and it's to their own detriment.
Well, that did happen occasionally. You just went to another city or something. And the other thing, in the Indian film industry, they wanted Western faces. So you would then be an extra.
Extras.
Yep. So, there are always ways to find out how to legally make money.
During a number of your travels, you wrote letters to your mother.
Correct.
Did you post them?
Every week.
Irrespective of where you were?
Absolutely. And then we would receive letters. So when you got to a city, the first thing you did was to go to the post restaurante and find out, because that was how you communicated letters. And I think I also kept diaries. So probably the letters came first and then the diaries. My parents kept all my letters, which was wonderful.
And you have the letters now?
And I have the letters
All of
now.
them?
All of them.
Have you ever thought of publishing them?
It just crossed my mind. At the beginning of COVID, I thought this is a wonderful time for me to sit down and transcribe my diaries, which I've got a lot of. And then they felt quite musty. So I decided I wasn't going to do that.
What do you mean by they felt musty?
Because they'd been in
other words, physically musty. They smelt musty.
Yes, they smelled musty.
Okay.
Yes. And also I couldn't read some of my handwriting. So I decided not to. But I think now where you can record, that would be the way to go. I did start when you had those big 8-inch floppy disks, but no one can actually translate them into another format.
I genuinely think you're sitting on a gem. It's very much like an 80 days around the world, except this is an 80 years around the world.
Well, I have 12 minutes around the world because I also sent all my photographs back to England. So whenever we got to a city, we would post them back. And unfortunately, my parents were storing them in their garage, and they had a flood. So probably 2/3 of them were destroyed. But I took the 1/3 and I made it into a video, 12 minutes of my 12 years of travel.
Where is that video?
It's sitting on a CD. So.
I hope I get a copy of it.
And I think that when I thought of my family having to go through hours and hours of these 35mm photos, that it was kinder for me to do 12 minutes. They can't fall asleep in 12 minutes.
Understandably, but you have to be honest that your exploits are so unique.
I don't know. I haven't even shown them to my grandchildren, actually, which probably I don't think they would appreciate them, actually.
I think what would probably be a good thing is if you'd give it to somebody who could write a screenplay. And from there, in other words, adapt it.
Yes.
So we take out what might be considered boring parts and we create a fluid narrative of it. I think it would be a very good movie.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I had actually decided that no more travel. And then somebody asked me if I wanted to start a business in South Africa. So it didn't take me too long to agree to that. That was in 1976. He was a master upholsterer. So he made these Chesterfields. And we had a shop at Hyde Park, and we called it Lordly Leathers because my father was a lord or viscount. And my surname was Leathers. So Lordly Leathers seemed to be appropriate because obviously all the furniture was in leather too.
Just explain to me, what is a Chesterfield sofa? I should know this, I presume.
It's a leather sofa with French buttons on it, on the back of it. And it's about a 3-seater or 2-seater. And it's, you'd have to have a big lounge or sitting room to be able to accommodate it. But it's very comfortable, it's very deep. And I say it's known by these buttons, these French buttons.
Are they round?
Yes.
So your clientele are the wealthy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was 1976 when the government were not renewing people with a 3-month temporary visa. And they were throwing people out in 24 hours. So as I had a business, I couldn't afford to just leave it. So they gave me 2 weeks to get out, to clear up the business. And then I thought, well, the business is actually doing very well. Why should I leave it? What can I do to stay? And the answer was a marriage of convenience, which I went through. My so-called husband wanted permanent residence in England. So it worked very well for both of us until I met my real husband, as it were. And then we had to obviously go through a divorce. He went to live in England and started a business in England, and I stayed here and got married.
How did you meet your husband?
He was feeling very sorry for himself, having had a very good party the night before. And he went to have a coffee to resuscitate himself. And I was moaning about not being able to stay in the country. And he gave me a suggestion that will not be repeated, that I go to Pretoria and suggest that I bribe the guy to stay. And then I owed him also too much for backgammon. He'd won too much on backgammon. So the only way to pay him back was to get married.
Okay. So you met him at a party the night after his hangover?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you were your marriage was the result of a hangover, in a way?
No.
Or backgammon?
Oh, backgammon more likely.
Backgammon.
Yeah.
We'll stick with backgammon.
Yes, I think so.
Yes. It's a quantum shift from effectively having only yourself as a responsibility on all your travels into a world which is fairly rigid, which is fairly structured, because in order to run a business, you need to have systems in place.
Yes.
How did you make that transition?
Into a business, it was difficult, especially in a new country. I thought you were actually going to ask me when I've been so independent, how was marriage going to? So that wasn't the business you were talking about of marriage. You were talking about a commercial business.
Well, you're more than welcome to elaborate on marriage too.
No, because I was actually in business with my husband. later.
Your second husband?
My second husband,
okay.
Yes. Yes, it was a learning curve for me. And unfortunately, what happened is the partner for the upholstery business did a bit of a dirty on me and left me a note saying he'd taken all the money and had bought himself a flight around the world and good luck. So I had a lot of debt to pay off. So I took three jobs a day to try and pay it off. And I must say, I won't mention the bank, but after about a year, the bank said, "You've done so well, we're going to just wipe out."
You raised the debt. Yeah. And you continued with the business?
No, I couldn't because I didn't.
So it literally was the demise of the business because he took all the money and its clientele.
Yeah, and not only that, and his expertise. I couldn't make the Chesterfield sofas. The word retirement doesn't even feature in my vocabulary. So when I was in Neisner, I looked around and I saw that there were self-drivers who came, an elderly couple, sort of middle-aged to elderly, and they wanted to explore but were too apprehensive to do so. With somebody else from Neisner, we set up a business called Neisner Hike and Bike, and we would take them through the forests on walks and then on cycle trips around, not only in Neisner, but in Plett around there are 32 wine farms in Plett. We would do a cycle ride of about 5 of them. So we would stop at each one, have a sample of their wine. And
buy the fourth one?
And buy the fourth one. And then go on to the next one. And then by the time they'd finished 5 wine farms, they were so happy with us.
I'm sure they were happy.
And TripAdvisor has only good things to say about us. You know, people think they are incredibly fit and would give me a 10 out of 10 for fitness. And they weren't fit at all, and they were huffing and puffing, and they couldn't ride their bicycle, and they fell off their bicycle. And
the perception of one's fitness is a perfect segue into you being 63 and deciding to take part in an extreme marathon.
Yes, that sounds familiar.
63, a marathon in the desert. What are the motivating factors?
Well, let me tell you where it first started. I went as a volunteer because I was an honorary ranger in Neisner, and they asked if any of the rangers would like to come up and actually volunteer. So I decided
to be part of the crew.
Yes, to
in
be
the
part
Kalahari.
of the crew. Yep.
Okay.
So it sounded interesting. So I accepted. But halfway through, there was a blind man, Jeff
Hilton Barber.
Right. His horse, they used to call the person who led him the horse.
Yes.
He fell sick. So they said to the volunteers, "Is anyone willing to try?" Well, I don't need any more of a challenge than that. So I said yes. And I led him on the last half of the Uruguay. He claims that I have taken him through more thorn bushes than anybody else because I had not learned the technique of leading him with a stick.
Just explain the technique of leading him with a stick.
Okay, so he walks behind you, and he has obviously the end of the stick, and you have the front of the stick, and you twist it with your arm or with your wrist to tell him to go left or right. I was doing it according to where I was initially, so that when he got to the thorn bush, he went straight through it. I had avoided it, but he went straight through it. But I managed to perfect this to such an extent that the next year he asked me to be his horse with his wife, and we did it. There was an incident where we were disqualified. It is a self-sufficient, as you will know. And his son was a volunteer. And at one of the stations, the water stations, there was his birthday cake. And he gave us a piece. That is for Borden. So at the next water station, they said, out. So we never finished it because of a birthday cake.
So with this birthday cake issue, did you kick up a bit of a ruckus? So, please, it's just a birthday cake.
We did.
Okay, but fell on deaf ears.
But they kept on saying it's self-sufficiency. You've taken food from somewhere else. You weren't carrying it in your backpack. What can you do? And I think, if you give in to that one, then someone else will be feeding somebody pitches at the next one.
Okay, so being a volunteer led to you actually
Yes.
partaking in the race. Were
Yes.
you the 63 or 64 then?
I was 63 when I started, and then I've done four
Done
others.
4.
Yes.
Okay.
Three others. I mean, I'm not talking about the one.
That you were a volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay. And just explain to me quickly what the race is about.
It depends on how you approach the race. For the youngsters, their thing is to do it as quickly as possible. For me, it is to do it as possible, as possible I can, to have time on my own and to reach each point in such a way that after a sleep I can make the next section of it. And because I was obviously slower than most of them, a lot of the time I walked on my own, and I found that was the time for internalizing, just questioning what you were doing. Sometimes, are you absolutely mad that you're doing this? And on one occasion it was 51 degrees, so you were very hot and sweaty. But you would know because you've done it. The sense of achievement at the end is quite amazing.
So many people ask me during and after the race, did you ever consider giving up? To be honest, I never considered giving up. All I considered is, how do I make it to the next point?
Absolutely.
How do I make it to the next point? And you'll be amazed how much of a motivator trees are. And the reason I say that is because in the Kalahari, there are few trees.
Yeah.
So when you're trundling along and you see a tree in the distance, you say to yourself, that's the tree I'm going to stop at.
Yes.
But when you get to the tree, you see another tree.
Absolutely.
That's the tree I'm going to stop at and sit underneath.
Absolutely.
And then you move on and on and on.
Yes.
And I know this sounds a bit odd, but probably one of the worst devices you can carry, and real sportsmen will disagree with me, but one of the worst devices you can carry is a fitness device during the marathon.
I never had one.
Best thing ever. And the reason I say that is because trees are a big motivator and your checkpoints are a big motivator, because you get to the next checkpoint and then justifiably you can justify to yourself that, okay, I'm going to sit there for 5 minutes, grab some new water. And I wouldn't say cold water because the water's all really, really tea hot.
Yes.
But you would leave that point and you would be going on and on and on. And then you would have a look and you go, because most of those points are approximately 10 kilometers apart. So then you would have a look at your device and you go, oh, I must be about 5 kilometers away. And it's like 400 meters. And then you look back and the point's just behind you.
Yes.
But it was an experience of a lifetime. And it is one of the few times in my life that I could feel one with my surroundings.
Yes.
That's the first thing. And so many people say to you, experience where you are at that time.
Yes.
Because often what will happen is we experience it in retrospect. Oh, when I was there.
Yes.
When I was there, I was experiencing every single moment.
Living in the moment.
You do.
Yes.
And the crunch of the sand underneath your feet, you hear it on and on and on. And it is the most amazing self-aware time that you can have.
The riverbed, the dry riverbed and the vegetation around it, it just gave you time to be able to, as you say, acknowledge and be grateful, and that one was privileged to do it. Did you have any blisters, by the way?
Blisters were my biggest fear because blisters take a lot of people out of the race. I had spoken to one of the organizers that organized it from the very beginning, and the initiators, Estie and Arendt.
Yes.
And I live in Johannesburg, and I said, is there an appropriate place for me to train for this that has similar conditions? And at that time, I was training with long pants, and it was middle of summer, but I was training in Johannesburg with long pants, a T-shirt and a sweatshirt and a jacket to try and acclimate, to try and acclimatize to the heat.
Yes.
And he said, you can do what you like, but there is no getting used to the sand.
Yes.
And he wasn't joking.
No.
And so after day 1, I took my shoes off and I had 1 blister. I thought, well, it's fine. I can deal with 1 blister. After day 2, I started getting blood blisters under my toes.
Yes.
During the marathon, you need to look after your own feet.
Absolutely.
Unless you have blood blisters, and then the doctor will come and drill holes in your toenails to try and relieve the pressure. And at the end of the race, I had blood blisters under all my toes. My feet were wrapped up, and it took me 12 months
No.
to grow toenails again.
Oh, yes.
After 12 months, they don't grow back like they were.
They don't.
And they look very odd.
Yes.
But now it's 2024 and my toenails are semi-normal again.
Yeah. I remember that I had one toenail still on. And when my feet were being looked at for blisters, this toenail fell off. And we had to search in the sand for this toenail because the physio was determined to stick it back again. So we eventually found it in the sand.
And then you wrapped it back up because the toenail allows you to carry on because it creates that guard of your toe when it whacks the front of your shoe all the time.
That's right. And then you get a blister on a blister.
Oh, yes.
Did you not thread your blisters?
I did, but it didn't work so well.
Didn't it?
And so then what they would do is at night they would put that concoction into with the syringe. It's to try and dry it out. And so they would inject it into double blisters, and you've never seen so many men cry before in your life. And then you go, he's getting an injection. Now we move from your 60s into your 80s.
Mm.
And as if taking part in these extreme marathons wasn't enough, you then took part in world championships in speed walking.
I've always been keen on exercising and running. About 5 years ago, I had a little niggle in my knee and decided to go and see whether I'd done anything wrong. And the orthopod said, well, both knees need repairing or replacing. So I said, okay, do them both at the same time. So I had them both changed into a bionic knee or knees. And then he said, why don't you just try fast walking instead of running? And that's how I got into it. And then somebody said, oh, you could go a little bit faster. So I tried to go faster, and then I started entering races and usually came first and last because I was the oldest and the only one in that age category. And then someone said, oh, you've broken a couple of South African records. Why don't you try a world record? So fortunately, my brother, he sponsored me. And we went to Sweden, and I walked my way to 2 world records. I wasn't really aiming for them at all, but being in that environment just showed me what camaraderie, what a difference it makes. Those people in Masters, which is 35 and over, we realize our sporting days are over, so let's just enjoy what we do. So there was much merriment and joking, and, your competitor, you'd go and probably say, well done, or all the best. I hope you don't beat me, but all the best. And it was just fantastic. 100-year-olds were doing sprints and high jump. So there's hope for you yet, Gavin.
No. No. You've had many experiences and many challenges, and I presume many victories. I don't necessarily mean in the World Championships, but in life. Mm. Have any of those victories been hollow?
I don't think so, because I usually just flip the coin and say, what have you got out of this? And realize that I've grown in some way or other, even if it is a hollow victory.
The other day, somebody said to me, you don't make a mistake. All you learn is there is a better way of doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it may take you a couple of tries to get the better way, but you're learning all the way.
So through all of these experiences, is there a common thread that has followed all the way through? Curiosity,
I think. Each step I've achieved, I'm always looking for another one, for another challenge. And I suppose that's a part of being a Capricorn, is that I love challenges, and I won't say no to a challenge, which can be a bit dangerous, I must say. There's so much there out in life to explore, and I'll never stop looking for new experiences, new adventures, and just new environments.
So is it the same applicable for a Libra?
Are you a Libra?
I am.
Oh, shame.
Okay, we'll move on. If there is one takeaway that you could have that would pop up into your mind right now, what is it?
for other people or for myself.
Life lesson.
Life lesson would be not to think you can't do it. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I believe that you've got to have a lot of confidence in what you're doing, and that takes you through quite a lot. But I think it's just the in pursuit of adventure and experience. That's what my life has always been about, and I will never stop. If I would, I mean, I'm taking up a couple of new things now, which are exciting.
What are they? Let us into that little world.
No. No. I'll let you know when I am fully fledged.
So we'll do this in part 3.
Yeah.
If you were sitting with your parents now and you had to recall on all of your life experiences, and if there is one moment that you feel you could emphasize and get recognition from your parents for, what would that be?
My parents were always quite dubious about where I would end up. And all I would say to them actually is thank you for being so open-minded and allowing me to make mistakes and being there for me when there were bad mistakes. Their open-mindedness has given me the most wonderful experience that anyone could want for. And I wish that my daughter, I have encouraged her to that, but I hope I can pass on that open-mindedness to her so she can do and make mistakes like I have, but I'm always there for her.
Anne, lovely way to end it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.